Welcome to Caddyshack, the corner office, where we recognize the most accomplished people who once caddied and grow the game by assisting those following their path. I'm your host, Kai Sato. Today, I'm lucky to be joined by my friend, Dave Dorros. Thanks for taking some time, Dave.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm excited to share my experiences and really how caddying shaped me as a person and those lessons I learned at a really young age and how I'd say they've really transformed my life and probably many others. And I think the positive attributes that you get from caddying that so many people forget or don't even know about. So, Kai, I'm happy to share that with you and really look forward to the conversation today.
Fantastic. Before we dive in on just some of the caddying stuff, you mind telling us, Dave, a little bit about what you do? I know you're at Eastdil with some dear friends of mine, but tell us how you've gotten to this corner office, what you do every day, and what your career's been like.
I am involved in real estate. Okay. And real estate, as you know, is a big profession. Many avenues, Guy, you can go to. I'm with a company called Eastdil Secured. We are the largest real estate focused investment bank in the world. Okay. And we serve, institutions really in their decision making and facilitating transactions at the highest level, the most sophisticated transactions. Where people are really advising on our technical expertise and experience to really guide them through to have the best outcome for themselves and their organizations. And so my career didn't always start out working at Eastdil Secured. We are I like to say that everybody knows Goldman Sachs, but we're the Goldman Sachs of the real estate business. And for example, Goldman Sachs hires us, if that's any kind of accolade. So, I started my career, I caddied, and I'd always been working really my entire life. I went to undergraduate. I started a construction company, moderately successful. Interest rates went to over 20%, and that was the end of that. And I have an engineering undergraduate degree from the great University of Maryland and an MBA from Indiana University. And I got into really development after I received my MBA from a company that's no longer existing, but they were the largest multifamily developer in the country. And, my role for them was to help them raise money. And really, we were syndicating properties, around the country that were all multifamily. That led me to, we had one of our 7 recessions I've been involved in, so don't feel bad if we go through another one. You always learn something from them and come out the other end better. And, from that, I went into brokerage, and I worked at, multiple brokerage firms and led CBRE's group, led Cushman & Wakefield's group, and, kind of fast forwarding, but now I'm with Eastdil Secured, and I've completed really some of the largest transactions that have completed to date around the country. And I've worked, on some global transactions as well.
As you know, I have some dear friends at Eastdil, including a guy like Jay Borsey, who's the salt of the earth and one of the best. I would venture to say that it's almost a disservice to call Eastdil the Goldman of investment banking, because you guys are head and shoulders by far and away better than everybody else. And, having started my career at a place like Mace Rich, a large public REIT, you not only saw that in the proof of work, but also those guys were having a lot more fun than we were. Their office was right down the street. And so it's a fantastic culture. It's a fantastic group of people.
Don't confuse having fun with hard work. Okay. I'm telling you, that's why caddying is such a good foundation. You got to work hard.
No question. Table stakes. All right. So caddying, where did you first caddy? How old were you when you started?
I grew up outside of Washington, D.C. in the suburbs. Okay. My first caddying experience was a place called Bethesda Country Club. And I had my first loop, and the guy proceeded at the end of the loop. This is after like hours waiting for to get a loop. And I was 13 years old. Okay. I rode my bike there. All right. The bags at the time were these huge leather bags. Okay. They were bigger than I was. And I remember the caddy master hands me this little bag. It looked like he kept a bowling ball in it. Okay. Never seen it. All right. And I knew how to play golf. Okay. We weren't in any country clubs. I grew up playing public courses, which I was thrilled with because I didn't know any better. Okay. And this bag, I opened it up and it was a little bit torn and dirty and it was full of golf balls. So I said, maybe I get to keep these. The guy says, hey, come on over here, sends me out you go out to the field and it's target practice. You're shagging golf balls. They hit them as hard as they can at you and you better pick up every one of them because these guys, they count them all. So it's like, all right, round one, they're shooting golf balls at me. How bad can this be? Okay. So next I get to the bag and the bag is bigger than me. This great big leather bag.
Big old
Oh
Burton
my
bag,
God, it's
probably.
huge. Okay. And I know the guy's looking at me. I'm looking at him like, I don't know if I can make it. Okay. So I made the loop. Okay. I got back. The guy goes, what a terrific job you did. I had no idea what I'd done or what I was doing. There's no instruction. He gives me $2. And he goes, I want you to have these golf balls. And I'm looking at him like, I'll take $4. I don't really need the golf balls. And so he gives me these golf balls and the $2. And I went on my way and I said, this was a really good experience. There's got to be other clubs out there that, have a different type membership where I can caddy. So I had a friend and, we went over to a place called Burning Tree. It's a private country club outside Washington, D.C. To this day, it's still men only. And back then it was really men only. Women couldn't even drive down the driveway. And really, very prestigious group of people that belong there. And at the time, it was predominantly politicians and some business people. And there weren't a lot of business people. There were more politicians, generals, people like that. And so, I learned so much there and they paid more. And you got to play golf on Mondays, despite we had school. You got to play golf all day Monday if you wanted. They're closed Monday. I think to this day, they still, have that rule. So it was, that in itself, and I loved golf, was like, you'd never get the experience of playing a course like that. So, I played and I think I learned a lot of lessons. I learned, look, life isn't fair every day. You get there at 7:00 and you learn about if you're not on time, you're not going out and you sit there and all these other people for whatever reasons get to go out first. You got to earn your way up, as you do with everything into, better people, better rounds and maybe you get to be a four caddy and they go on a cart where you're really lucky. You don't have to, carry two bags that, you by the end, you can't even walk. They're so heavy. So, the lessons that you learned, I think, and the ability to be around people and to hear the conversations that they had. These were pillars in the community. My first loop was with a senator. I'm 13 years old. I didn't know what a senator was. And I remember like he hit it, and at the time the courses were really heavily treed. You had the fairway, then you had the trees, and it was woods. He hit it square in the woods. And he's like, son, did you see where that ball went? And he looked at me like, you better tell me yes. So lo and behold, we found his ball right away. And I was like, all right, this is how, caddying works. But I think what you really learn is, and what's really important is that you learn how to be a good listener, first and foremost. They don't want you telling them, oh, you keep your left arm straight, has your posture, change your grip a little bit. You're a good listener. And as you get older and, if that's your profession, then you can really advance it to the next level where you can really, articulate your skill set to what they're really trying to accomplish and really help them. But, for these rounds at that age and at that time, it was really, you become a good listener. And why is that so important is, you're sitting there raking the sand traps and you're listening to these people that you would never have the opportunity to be around. They are, some of them were CEOs of companies, some of them, all of them were very successful. They wouldn't have been there if they weren't that successful. And I think, so you listen and you learn quickly what to say, what not to say, more importantly, and when to say it. Those are all skills that in business are critical. You master those skills, you're probably going to have a pretty good career. And you combine that with hard work Okay. And let me tell you, it is hard work. And you combine that with hard work, and I think it's a recipe to really, kind of set yourself up. And
What was the caddy yard like at Burning Tree? You had to get there early. Here you're a public course player, and then you get this idea to start caddying, and then you, I think, very adeptly look for the best opportunity after this $2 round. But you show up there at 7 in the morning. What were the other caddies like? Was there more training? You're going out with the Senators, and then we'll piggyback on that. I want to know, what your friends thought of this, or maybe what your family thought of this, because all of a sudden you're transported into really a completely different world.
so, here's the experience. You had professional caddies. Okay. You had the quote, Caddyshack. Okay. We've all seen the movie, but the Caddyshack was a cinder block building. Okay. You had to get there at 7 o'clock. Okay. There was no like being late, anything else. And you had to be ready to go. Okay. If you're fortunate enough, and you learn these things as you go. But again, these are lessons you take with you in your life. Like you better be prepared because you could go from 7 until 5 or 6 without any food. You'd hope that they'd feed you. Okay. And you'd hope that you'd get a loop. So, you get in there at 7 o'clock and you're looking around and you're the youngest guy. And they had, an experienced crew that, knew the caddy master, knew who to get. The members would request them. They knew their way around and they're older. So it starts out, you start playing cards. Okay. There's nothing else to do. Nobody really comes on till maybe 9. You get a few early birds, but so you sit there and there's absolutely nothing to do. So you better be a good card player because you're just going to lose the $5 you're going to make and then probably then some. Okay. So not a lot of fun. All right. If you didn't know how to play cards, and they played other games like, dice and, just all kinds of, inner city games essentially that I grew up in the suburbs. So like, I didn't even know what these were. So then you sit there and, you had to bring your own food basically. So, you eat your, mangled up peanut butter and jelly sandwich that, I don't know if I could eat one today, but, that was the best thing you ever had. And then you hope you got called. If it rained, you're out, and if it wasn't crowded that day, you're probably out. And, so what'd you learn? You learned that, life's not always fair. Okay. Those guys that, had been there a long time, they got precedence over you and, they may not even done that good a job, but, they were going out first. And then you learn like, all right, who's controlling the shots here? It's the caddy master. So I'm watching these guys like, they're giving handshakes to the caddy master. I'm like, what's that all about? I learned at a real young age. Okay. Not a bad thing to give appropriate handshakes, to the right people and, and have them on your team. Okay. So
Some of those yards, sometimes the caddy master just got a little sticky fingers before anything happened.
yeah, unbelievable. But look, it's all life lessons that, and they were innocent lessons back then, so I think that, we can keep talking about it. And I think you'll see, for people watching this video potentially, like, what do I get out of it if I'm a caddy? What's really in it for me? There's a lot more into it for you, which you may not realize other than the money. And, I didn't realize that.
Sure, fire away on some of those things because, like you said, the EQ component, the soft skills, just how to interact with people, being a good listener. But what are some of those things that when you maybe got your first job or things that you still use in your daily life now that were forged as a looper?
Yeah, I think that, like I said, your listening skills. Really, when I say everybody says that, okay, but what is your listening skills? Your listening skills are what's that person really saying or doing? So, and you learn that quickly because you're just not going to get, paid well, absent that. And I'm not saying pander to the person or, that kind of conversation, but it's like, what's this person all about? Okay. What is the situation? Okay. Are they out there with the guest just trying to have a great time, not really caring about their score? Or, is score everything, is winning everything? Are they scraping every putt that's, 5 feet away where they shouldn't be just to win the hole? And that's so important for them. You're not going to be the person that says, hey, yeah, you're not taking that putt. That's how, articulating that into how I play today is like, that's how you win. It's like, no, 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 no. You got to putt that 3-footer. But, I think you learn what's important to people. And it could be as simple as, when you get to the turn, he or she who's back there, hopefully serving you a little food after the members have gotten theirs. You learn real quick that if you're nice to that person, you'll get an extra, candy bar or whatever. These are small little things, but if you really look at it and say, these are big things, because that's how life works. And, yeah, you learn. And I think also what was another big thing is like just being around men at the time, older men, okay, because I was really, young. And, I never would have had that opportunity because you're around your peer group. And you ask, what did some of your friends say when, you talk about, who you, played with today and what your family say. And, you know, I don't think and I couldn't probably articulate it, clearly enough to them how great it was. The conversations you're listening to, they just, I felt that they wouldn't understand it. But you as a young man listening to this it was like, you're going to school, listen to these guys are already successful. What do they say? What do they do? And, you learn. It's like, so now, when I go out and I get a caddy, and we'll get to that in a little bit, but when I get a caddy, it's not about me. Okay. I'd love it to be about me, but it's not about me. It's like, I want my guests to have the greatest experience. So like, they're like, every caddy starts doting over you right away. It's like, no, you don't need to do that. All right. I'm good here. Okay. Just go. I want the guests to have a great experience. Give them your knowledge and share that knowledge with them. Okay. And don't tell them I said that. Share that knowledge with them. Okay. So that they have and walk away thinking like, this is my greatest day, and then you've kind of paid it forward. Those are all the little things you learn that are, I think, life lessons. And I think the biggest one is hard work. You are not getting anywhere without hard work. And anybody who tells you that, is, it's ill-gotten because, caddying is hard work. Maybe if you're lucky to be a 4 caddy, okay, it might be a little bit different. And you can quote, get your steps in, but in reality, it's hard work. And, you have to be humble and, you've got to, take a lot. A lot of the people that you caddy for, you don't get to pick and choose. That's one thing about caddying. You don't pick who you want to. You hope that they pick you once you earn that, but you don't get, so you all walks of life.
You mentioned some stuff that I think is important for anyone to hear, but especially our mutual and dear friend, Skip Bronson, who listens to every single episode of these, but he was a looper himself. And, when I showed up to Bel Air in college and was caddying, you didn't get Skip's loop, right? That was Tommy's loop. And that was 4 putters, 2 carts, 4 putters. Tommy's no longer with us, but do you think he was a little protective of that thing and maybe not very nice to new caddies, right? That's just how it went. And so you were dealing with grown-ass men and you had to pay your dues and get there even a little earlier than 7. And sometimes you didn't get out. But, it's the way you and I met was through our dear buddy Skip, who obviously was a looper himself and loves this game maybe more than anyone you'll ever find. But it's all encapsulated in that, right? For each of us, it's figuring out how to do the job, how to do it well, most importantly, adapting to the people, and then also just not taking yourself too seriously out there and, making sure that, when you have guests out there, like he had you at Bel Air, that this is the best day they can possibly have. And so, and I think whether it's New York on the bag or my dear friend Geraldo or anybody like that, those guys, they understand that. And they're going to make sure that when you're at Bel Air or you're Congressional or anywhere, they're having a great time. But there's so much nuance to that. And, that Jimmy Dunn, who's obviously a legend in the golf community, he says that he can spot a former caddy within a couple of steps on the first tee, right? How people interact with people. Do they go introduce themselves? If you've been a looper, I think you have a lot more empathy for what they're up against that day. And especially if it's 116% humidity and all that type of stuff.
It's so true. And Skip, who, many of you have heard his podcast, I guess, but, I really didn't know him, and I had the pleasure and the honor really of being paired with him through my friend. And I'm telling you, he articulated what it's like to go from being a caddy, okay, to really the top of his industry. Okay. He listened, he told great stories. Okay. He listened to your stories. I mean, he made you feel good. I told my friend after my loop with you and at Bel Air, and look, Bel Air is a special place, but we have caddies at Congressional. I like to think that's a special place. And I took the red eye back from Los Angeles to Washington, D.C., and got up the next day and I said, you know what? I'm going to go play Congressional because I want to see if it's as good as Bel Air, and the experience with the caddies is as good. And I'll tell you that my experience with you was it was unsurpassed because you're a true professional. You've learned all these things. But I'm going to give you another example why it's so important. We played the next day, and you just saw on TV. What's that course they have the Genesis? Riviera. We played Riviera. And look, nothing against Riviera. It's an unbelievable place. But the caddy wasn't you. And, I don't know, just didn't have, the greatest day, wasn't hitting it that well. And it just was a different experience. And, regardless of how great something is, whether it be, a golf course or whether it be, your job or, your relationship with your family or your friends or whatever, all these little skills add up. And I think make you, really a much better person. And I'll say, when I started my career, when, I was looking for people to hire, two things I'd look for, well, many things, but two important things. If they said they were a caddy, they probably would get hired. Okay. They probably would get hired. They're pre-screened, regardless of all the other stuff on their resume or, and everything else. They would get hired because they knew what to do. There wasn't a lot of downtime explaining things and, why are we doing this and all the other stuff. Caddy or an Eagle Scout, those two, went to the top of the pile. In fact, my partner for 15 years was a caddy, and I'll tell this story. He goes, I'm interviewing him. He was employed at the time, and he really wasn't in our business. And, he had a good skill set, and he said, I was a caddy. And I said, you're hired. And I said, I want you to start, can you start on Monday? This was like a Thursday. He goes, I got to give 2 weeks. I said, do you know how to work hard? I know you do. So this guy worked 2 jobs, okay, for 2 weeks, and he was a caddy, and that was the start of it. And he and I would only hire caddies. Now, unfortunately, we've run out of great caddies to hire because, I think there's probably a lot of opportunities for people to pursue out there without really realizing, how great the skill set this is. And, I'm not sure whether it's like, I don't want to talk about being a caddy because it's not glamorous and I didn't have an internship at, wherever, but I'm telling you that people know how to talk about what they did and the skills that they learned. Those are the life skills. That is what you need. I mean, good and bad, had some bad ones too.
I didn't put it on my resume when I was in college for a little while, which was a mistake. And it would inevitably come up in conversation. It's really all people wanted to talk about. I was super fortunate because I was a caddy in college. I had a plethora of job opportunities and was super lucky and had a lot of guys that helped me navigate those opportunities. But there were 2 things. Being the captain of the lacrosse team in college and being a caddy were 2 things that people wanted to talk about, right? Because you can have all this other stuff and it's fairly comparable. And then to your point, I'd work 2 internships every summer. And so in addition to looping, I would start, in May and then not finish until almost September because I wanted to get as much experience as an intern. Obviously, you're not tasked with running the ship, but just some proximity to different industries, try to figure out what the hell I was going to do in my life. But I think anybody who's ex-caddy, it's a skill set. It's super unique. Former military, former athletes, you've generally had to go through that hard work piece. It tends to be pretty well ingrained. And also a good buddy of mine, Josh Isner, was on last season. He runs, $50 billion publicly traded company, is now a 40-year-old. And he's just a super impressive guy. But He was the manager of the Harvard basketball team, in addition to being a golfer when he was there, and just got his ass kicked, right? But got to learn leadership from someone like Tommy Amaker. And he recommends to everyone, just get outside the classroom, work as much as you can, and work thankless, shitty service jobs, right? Like whether it's anything where you're the lowest on the totem pole, you just have to deal with it. And if you can get through that stuff, it really just kind of forges who you are. And I think you touched on something that's so important, Dave, why I love caddying and we love caddying. You know, you get to play golf, you're learning so many lessons. It's a nice outdoor job, but the people that you're around for 4 to 6 hours, you don't get that doing anything else, right? You might be a valet and park their car, or maybe you wait on their table, but the reality is you are an integral part of that experience. And like you touched on, you can make it a lot better or worse. And so there's real responsibility that comes with it.
Yeah, I'd say, and we didn't rehearse this, you and I, before we got on the phone, but you couldn't have said it any better. And I think you're a shining example of, the skill set that you learned. I didn't know you were captain of the lacrosse team because, that may be ahead of caddying, but because the amount of discipline involved there. But I think that, look, my friends now, we're all golfers for the most part. And, once later in life, you'll learn that, anybody who's worth their salt that you want to be around, okay, and they've been successful, they're all pretty generous, okay, especially if they started out with humble beginnings like most of us did, especially if they were a caddy, and they want to share that with other people, both the experiences and their wealth, which is phenomenal, and that's what you find in golf. Okay. So not only do you get all the skills that you just talked about, Kai, okay, you get the pleasure of really like, okay, now let's go play the game. Okay. Let's really appreciate it. And the people that you're around, they're generally pretty phenomenal people. And if you're not going to be around them. But you can go play, once you get to a certain level, you can probably go play just about anywhere you want in the world. And golf has a common theme. And as a caddy, you learn the game. Okay, that's another thing. You really learn the game, like how it works, how to read the greens. I get out there and it's like I get these caddies and like, I mean, I ask them first couple of holes where I hit it and, it's completely wrong. But, you don't say anything. You just, let them read and say, I think you can go really help them a lot better, so it's you learn about the game and you take those skills and transfer them, to your own game and your friends' games. But, if we're fortunate enough to, be able to play, it opens up a world of opportunities on top of all the skill sets you have.
These are cathedrals of golf. To me, these courses are walkable works of art. And we're so lucky to be there and have proximity to them. You said I was super lucky. I got to play Riv yesterday because we wanted to see the tournament conditions as much as possible with my mentor, Patrick Weitzel. And just, I've got a very cool wife and she's supportive. She's like, anything with Patrick, you get to go. And so, just the two of us just wanting to, I got to play in a pro-am there and I get to play that course a fair amount. It's actually my favorite golf course. It's certainly not Bel Air in terms of culture, but for just a golf course, I think it's an incredible place. But to see it, right? I mean, to see the ball not stopping when you've got a downhill putt and, the rough is still out and you're taking a 7-wood just trying to advance a ball for something that's 180 yards or all that stuff. But, we're super blessed to have these things. And, you certainly gain, I think, a deeper appreciation when you've been packing bags at places like this too.
The physical beauty of these courses, again, you learn later in life how extraordinary they are. I mean, they're meticulously kept. They're thoughtful. It's really, you try to keep track of your own lawn and take care of it. It's like you learn, like, oh my God, how do these guys do this? So, it's a lot of hard work. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
Back into your looping days, and you're at Burning Tree, which is, I mean, for my vote, one of the greatest places there possibly is. The course is incredible. Gil Hans redo, the fact that there's no menu, you can get some fabulous food just at a snap of the finger. And the members are just so cool. And I also like a nice golf logo, and they've got a very cool one. How long did you caddy there? You started there when you were around 13. How long did this persist? You wind up going to Maryland. Did you continue to caddy at all when you were in Maryland?
That lasted probably 5 years, I'd say till 18, kind of, um, off and on, look, it's only warm here, X months a year. Yeah. It's snowing right now, unfortunately, but go figure in March. But it's not, we have golf weather, you know, maybe 3 or 4 months a year, really for, the country clubs. Okay. For the people that are taking caddies. So it's not an infinite amount of time. But so I did that for about 5 years. Um, I did not caddy, when I was in college. I took that skill set and I had other jobs as I went to school. And again, but I think the discipline of it all and the hard work, just paid such dividends. So, it was a good run.
You mentioned the first loop being with a senator. Who were some of the others? I know the membership can be a little bit clandestine at times, but is there anyone who stands out and maybe you were just in awe of maybe one of your favorite loops when you were there?
Growing up in Washington, D.C., nobody will ever say it's a government town. But I don't remember who it was with, but I played with this guy and obviously very successful. I don't think I've ever gotten a tip like that. Okay. And I was like, what does this guy do? And, wasn't dressed, extravagantly or anything else, but he was, quote, a government contractor. And I was like, what is that? Because you don't think that the government has contracts. I'm just telling you, when you're 14, 15 years old, that's not what you're thinking about. And it turns out this guy's one of the largest government contractors, in the whole United States. Big, big defense contractor. Fast forward, where did that go kind of mentoring guy? It's when I was at one of the firms I worked with, we became the largest government contractor in the real estate business that nobody else was doing. And people didn't even understand that the government, used and owned a lot of real estate. And, I'd learned that little lesson from this guy, like, there must be good opportunity here or this guy wouldn't be so generous. So, I mean, I think, a little lesson like that was very interesting. I worked, at the time, they had a lot of generals, um, admirals, people like that. To this day, I play a congressional. I play with a friend of mine. He's an admiral, awesome person. I met him on the tee at, congressional. We've been, friends ever since. And, it's just that kind of person that you learn how you can relate to them. You know how they're going to play the game of golf. If you move your ball out of a divot, they're probably going to report you. Okay. That cheated. You learn integrity, how critical that is. You get up on the green and it's a 3-foot putt. You could probably make it. It'd be a lot easier if they gave it to you. He's like, you got to putt this and your scores go up, unfortunately. So, I think some generals, some military people that candidly I wouldn't have been exposed to. I didn't have any. My father was in the Army, but again, that was ages ago. So really didn't have any military people in the family. So I got exposed to all that. Got exposed to really some titans in the industry, if you will. And, that back then was car dealers and it was, people like that. Okay. Contractors, home builders, and now it's, more refined. You have much more corporate, at Burning Tree and, really it's the titans of the industry from around really the world, if you will. A lot of them have memberships there. So, I mean, those are the kind of people at the time that, I had really got to be around. I never would have had that experience. Never would have had that experience. And it matures you.
Why did you get your MBA?
I had an engineering degree. Probably should have stuck in engineering, but I had an engineering degree and, I really didn't have much direct business experience. I had started some smaller businesses and I said, you know what? I'll go get an MBA and they were popular at the time. And I said, I'll go get an MBA and, and see what that's all about. And also I wanted to see what the peer group, was doing. And at the time you could literally go from a good school, you could go get your MBA. Indiana is top 10 business school and it always has been. You go get your MBA, you're going to get a good job and, you can see where the world takes you. So I think that's why, it was attractive to me. And, I really wanted to see who the peer group were. Who are these people who are getting MBAs and getting all these great jobs? What did they have that I didn't have? And, it's a 2-year program, it goes quick.
Was golf part of your MBA experience? Was it part of your undergrad? Were you always playing? When did you join your first country club? All that stuff.
I joined my first country club. To answer the question, yes, playing, all throughout all those years. Okay. All public courses. And I knew a few people that, belonged to country clubs. And if they took you, it was a thrill. Okay. It was like there wasn't the proliferation of clubs that there are now. Okay. They've really become popular. And look, we're seeing some go away, but there's still a lot of great ones out there. And the good ones are even getting better. So the first country club that I joined was a place called TPC outside of Washington, just being built. And I really didn't have enough money to join as an individual. So I joined as a corporation with, some other people and did that for like 10 years. Great course. They had a lot of pro um, events there. And at the time, for many years, it was the venue for anything that came through Washington, D.C. through, the PGA, to play the course, the tournaments there. Fast forward, on my bucket list was to play in a pro-am. And, I've played in several now, but one of them was there. So I got to play the course with a pro, and see how, they hit it versus how I hit it. Hit it terribly that day, but that's beside the point. But so, yes, I played golf, continuously. And then the second place I joined was a place called Kings Creek. It's in a place called Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. Um, and that town and that club has really matured. I joined it as, it's brand new. It's one of the initial members. I think it's just had maybe its 30th anniversary. Gravel parking lot, lots of beer. It was great. No tee times. It was awesome. And no caddies. And that was in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. I had a beach house down there. And then I went from there, and then I joined Congressional, which I'm a member now, still a member at the other place as well, but joined Congressional finally. I should have joined it many years ago. And it's been a really extraordinary experience. And it's for all the reasons that we've talked about, but they have a caddy program. And you take caddies, and it's much more advanced now. They grade the caddies. You can request them via email. None of that existed. The caddy master, administrates everything. But, you get I'd say the level of caddies ranges from beginning caddies to very, advanced senior people who do it professionally. And again, I think I said it before, when I get a caddy, it's really, I want them to, for my guests, okay, if I have a guest, I want them to focus on the guest, not obviously, but focus on the guest and make sure that guest, or guests, plural, have a great time. And, the caddy can make it or break it. And you walk away, even if you played poorly, you walk away and can say, God, what experience I had. That was unbelievable. Even though you played terrible, okay? I remember I was playing with this guy, and he was a client. And, terrible golfer. I mean, the divots were like longer than him. They look like the top of my head, when he's done. And, so I kept saying, oh, great shot. You advance it, 25 yards. Finally, he turned and he goes, Dave, you don't have to say that. You don't have to tell the caddy to say that. Okay. I know I suck. I'm having a great time. We're good here. I went over to the driving range, got him a bucket of balls, and just brought him out. We were good.
When I was caddying in college, my main loop on the weekends was a guy named Randy Brandt, who's a Macerich executive. I later went to work for that company, and then Mace Siegel became kind of a quintessential mentor in my life until he passed away. That's actually him hanging behind me. And, seeing Randy do deals was always really fascinating. Seeing a lot of people do deals. And so, there's the gambling, drinking golf, then there's the, some of that, but mixed with a lot of transaction. And it was, at the time, we were doing a lot of the Forever 21 deals. And so had Larry Meyer out there, who was a really good guy. Wouldn't say the strongest golfer, but a really, really good guy. And so, obviously my job was to make sure that he was having a good time and he was well taken care of. And I really kind of took it like a sport. I prided myself on, if you were, an occasional golfer, but had some decent athleticism, a lot of it was just course management, right? Green reading and course management. So, hey, you don't need to hit this hero shot, lay up, right? Take the big number out of play. And then green reading, right? Like if you're not used to it, you can, especially a place like Bel Air, you could put it off the green. I have. And so, things like that would really factor. I don't know if we got to be around some of these, but the big cash games were super fun. But seeing, maybe some Asian billionaire in town who runs one of the largest conglomerates in the world squaring off against, someone that you really looked up to. And I one time had the real conflict that I was caddying against someone that I really looked up to, but I still had to do my job, right? And try to bludgeon him to death and win the match. And so, just understanding there's a job to do, get it done. And you do that objectively and you do it to the best of your abilities. But, there was one... You mentioned Monday golf, and I quit playing lacrosse my senior year, and I just played as much golf as I possibly could because it's hard to golf in LA, and to have proximity to a place like Bel Air was really, really special. But there was a guy named Merle Hopkins. He taught the basic accounting class at USC, and I ditched his class very deliberately one time to go caddy for Randy and a guy named Jeff Brotman, who helped build Costco, right? One of the founders of Costco. And I was just like, look, I'll figure out the accounting stuff later. But the opportunity to meet with someone like Jeff and to understand site selection for Costco at the time, a store that I'm still a Black Card member of and love, almost as much as someone like Charlie Munger did, who was on the board. That really just opened my eyes. And I think that kind of back to germane to what we've been talking about. It's just the assimilation and the proximity that you gain and doing a pretty cool job. And hopefully you make a little more than $2 at it.
Not only that, you spend 4 to probably realistically 5 hours, of unencumbered time with someone. I'm telling you, you get to know them and they get to know you. And it's a true test of, what is this person really made of and who are they? After 5 hours, you know what you have. And it's like you said, you may not be doing deals on the golf course. Everybody thinks that. People who don't play golf think, oh, you just here out there 5 hours doing deals out there. You're really forming relationships. It's all about relationships. You're forming those relationships and everything else is much easier once you have that relationship. And, to the extent that, you're just kind of parachuting in without that, or you don't have that skill set to form that relationship, it's really hard. And I guarantee you, Kai, you wouldn't have had the opportunity, forget your accounting class, to be around, the founder of Costco, Forever 21, like, how do I pick a site out? What am I really looking for? Screw those demographics. This is what I'm looking for in 3 sentences. And, they're really experiences like that I think last, a lifetime and can't be replicated. And, or I think are extremely difficult to be replicated. So I think it's, I hope that anybody, listening, you feel free to reach out to me and Kai. I just volunteered you or myself, to share some of this because I think it's invaluable what you're going to learn. Invaluable.
That's why we exist. Very well said. We'll bring it to a close with that. You mentioned something that not a lot of people do. I've heard a lot of people saying, before I hire someone, I want to bring them on the golf course and I want to see them putt those 3-footers. I want to spend those 5 hours with them. Even if they don't golf, I just want to see how they interact with maybe the valet, the caddy, the people in the grill room, just how that goes. But you guys deliberately hired former caddies, including your business partner. Are there any other stories that you've come across, people that you thought were really cool and maybe, you shared the fact that you guys looped that we should explore on this show and shed further light on?
My old partner, good Irish Catholic, John Howley from Boston, you get the accent. I think he would be a good one. I have to think about that. I can, you can say it in your next show. I should have been more prepared, I guess, and come up with who I think would be somebody really great. Maybe Ed Leisure, another guy. He did some caddying. He went on to become CEO of a company called Billabong, and with most people have heard of. But he's figuring out how to pick retail locations.
it's just like, Dave, when you and I met, right? I mean, it's something that Skip and I always share, but for the most part, people have found that it was a really, really unique job, and it kind of transports them back to a time where they're really coming up and trying to figure out what this thing is all about, this whole life thing, this whole career thing. And then I think most important, like you said, you're around adults, especially men who are usually rather accomplished, and you're learning a ton. Or a lot of women have shared, hey, I got to caddy for other women and they were badasses and they inspired me. And, long before Lean In, like they were that version for them. And so, yeah, I think it's just, you can learn so much by working. You can learn so much by being around people who aren't your parents, and you have to, build a bond and a relationship with them. And so I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing, your story. And not surprisingly, it's helped forge an extremely successful career.
You said that, as you progress, you belong somewhere, you can take someone out on the course. That's a different level. You want to see how they interact with people, you can put them through the paces. When you're starting out, your resume is pretty blank. And, most people that are in the hiring roles, not most, but a lot of them are in the hiring role, that a lot of them have an interest or play golf or whatever. But it's something that when you're just starting out that, you're not even thinking about it, how important it is. But it's really, you'd wish they take you out on the golf course, but in reality, you can talk about it, talk about your skill set, et cetera. So I think it's sequential as you build that up, and then as you advance your career, yes, you go out and play and you see how you interact and treat people. But in reality, if you don't have a whole lot to say and you start out, it's a lot better than, a lot of other jobs are really not getting a lot of skill set, just kind of resume stuff.
The one thing that I did see, and I think it's important enough to even dovetail on there, so many people golf now, and it's cool, right? The fact that Tiger was a person who inspired me to play golf. No one in my family played, and I was a baseball player, and I was 12 years old, and Tiger burst out on the scene, and I just said I want to do that. And very, very similarly, didn't own a college shirt the first time I went to play 9 holes, and was using my grandmother's hand-me-down turquoise Wilsons, and looked totally ridiculous and couldn't have loved it anymore. But I think you genuinely have to love the game. And so we are seeing this amazing resurgence of the game. And, especially my generation, I'm not playing pickup basketball anymore, but I've long been a golfer. But the point is, when I was at Mace Rich, I worked with some people who they knew that I came in through caddying, and they knew that I'd already forged a relationship with a lot of the senior executives. And so, I didn't stop to think about that at all. It wasn't like, oh, I got my foot in the door and I already know the C-suite and all this stuff. But for them, it was, I think, blatantly, it was very intimidating. And so they said, oh, we're going to start getting golf lessons and we're going to get into the game. But you got to be authentic about it, right? You have to actually love going and playing and being a part of it, because it is a big commitment. And guess what? It's deliberately hard. It's a hard game for almost anybody to play, and you can be good at it and suck in any given day. And so I think for people that are listening, and that's where you get such a leg up, especially if you're looping, you learn the game. You learn how to read greens. You learn what club selection is like. You learn what course management is, or you don't last. And so I think people have to genuinely love it. I think many people do. And we're seeing a really unique chapter in the sport of golf. But for anybody who's listening, thinking about that, just, like anything, you got to love it.
I'll leave you on this is like, it really probably one of the more important points is, these people now. And people you get in these companies are like, how could you possibly know that person? Okay. And how could they genuinely be so, I don't want to say affectionate, but like I like this person. Okay. And they're sitting there grinding it out. Okay. Trying to get the relationship with that person that they're never going to get like you have by spending all that time with them. Okay. It's really, I think it's really something that's critically important. So hopefully, some of the listeners probably are experiencing that, and raise themselves up and see where they go. Well, I appreciate you time today. So thank you.
Thank you so much. A lot of fun. And I look forward to teeing with you soon.
And you have an open invitation to play Congressional anytime you want.
I've never been, and I'll absolutely take you up on that. I appreciate it, Dave.
There's 2 courses, so it'll test your skills.
as you know, our fund Mallow is based in Chevy Chase, and my business partner lives in Potomac, and so I'll absolutely take you up on that and look forward to the experience. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and Kai, I'll have to put you through a test and see how you treat everybody.
I'm open to it.
Thank you.
A lot of fun. Take care.